Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Into the Rift Podcast, Season 2, Episode 6. I'm your host, Kenny. Joining me is my brother and co-host, Garrett.
Yo!
Today, on this episode, we're going to be talking about people bursting into flames. Spontaneous human combustion.
Like walking into a Yankee Candle with a set of Jerry curls.
Oh my god. So what is spontaneous human combustion?
That shit that happened to Michael Jackson during the Pepsi commercial?
Kind of, but not really. So spontaneous human combustion is the concept of a living person or someone who just recently died, where the body will just light on fire without any apparent external source of ignition.
Otherwise known as some whack-ass voodoo bullshit.
So spontaneous human combustion's been around for, it's been mentioned a long time. One of the first recorded cases was a knight in the 14th century who was drinking too much wine, and then all of a sudden he burst into flames in front of his parents.
All I can imagine is like he's in the armor, like full-on plate armor, while he bursts into flames and just turns himself into like one of those big green egg smokers.
Nice. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing. So the term was actually first coined by a Paul Rowley. He was a fellow of the Royal Society. It was an article published in the Philosophical Transactions, and it was concerning the mysterious death of Countess Cornelia Zangari Bondi. And he was the one who actually coined the term spontaneous human combustion all the way back in 1746. So people have been talking about this for a little while now.
So people have been lighting their weaves for quite some time.
Yes. So let's get into some stories here, actually about, or some cases, I should say. And this topic was also covered in the British Medical Journal in 1938. And there was an article by L.A. Perry, and he cited an 1823 published book, Medical Jurisprudence. So there's a couple of characteristics that all these victims have in common from that work. It's not true for everybody, but it seems like a lot of people share these characteristics. So the victims are usually chronic alcoholics, usually elderly females, but not necessarily. And it says the body is not burned spontaneously, but some lighted substance has come into contact with it, which is like a point of contention, or whether or not, is it spontaneous if is there a ignition source or not. The hands and feet usually fall off.
Okay. That's a little odd.
The fire has caused very little damage to combustible things in contact with the body. So you'll see that a lot in these cases that we're going to be talking with. And then the combustion of the body has left a residue of greasy and fetid ashes, very offensive in odor. And you'll see that a lot as well. There'll be like greasy soot in the rooms where what's left of the bodies are found.
Pleasant.
Yeah. So let's actually go to the report of the case of Cornelia Zangari Bondi. So during her last dinner, the 66-year-old countess was dull and heavy. Some accounts report that she was a heavy brandy drinker and that she used to sprinkle camphorated brandy on her body to relieve physical pain. So the maid accompanied her to her room, and the two spent over 3 hours just chatting and praying. Then her maid left her when she was asleep. The next day, the countess did not wake up when she normally did. So the maid went to wake her and found just her remains left. The room was full of soot. The body of the countess had reduced to a pile of ashes that was little more than a meter from the bed, though her lower legs from the knee down, 3 fingers, and the front of her skull relatively intact. The rest of her body was reduced to a pile of ashes.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Big oof, homie.
Yeah. Just, you drank a little too much brandy and all of a sudden, boof.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you almost want to be like, it was an alcohol fire because the whole spritzing it on yourself, but the whole house didn't burn down or whatever.
Yeah. So it said the bed and the rest of the furniture had not been affected by the fire, but they were covered by a greasy and smelly layer. So I guess, like how you're deep frying something and like the oil's popping.
Yeah.
I guess there was some splatter. when she was going up in flames.
Well, was she rather rotund?
Not that I see here.
Maybe she was like a big piece of fatty bacon and, just pop.
It said on the floor there was an oil lamp covered with ashes, but didn't have any oil in it. And the way the sheets were found seemed to indicate that the Countess had risen at some point in the night. So,
well, if the bitch got caught on fire, I'd probably hop up out of bed too.
Yes, exactly. So she probably got lit up and then
one way to put it,
tried to get out of bed, collapsed because she was burning, and then was reduced to a pile of ashes. And the only thing that was left was her legs from the knees down, a couple of fingers, and like a piece of her skull.
Yeah, so the bitch probably thought, she was like, oh no, I got some acid reflux. Woke up and was like, just like Lego Star Wars Yoda death noise.
Oh my god. So that was back in like the 1700s, which is pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine just like walking into your boss's room to wake her up and just legs?
Yeah, just shit. Now how is going? Who the hell's gonna pay me now? Just like, well, maybe if I don't tell any of these bitches, I can keep this house for myself. I don't know how you go weekend and burn just a couple of foams and a piece of skull, but
oh yeah. So then, if we go to 1885, so late at night on Christmas Eve, in the small town of Seneca, Illinois, a woman named Matilda Rooney burst into flame. She was alone in her kitchen when it happened. The fire quickly incinerated her entire body except for her feet. The incident also claimed the life of her husband, Patrick, who was found suffocated from the fumes in another room of the house.
Just, you stinky bitch.
Oh, God. This tragedy left investigators baffled. There was no reason to suspect foul play. The Rooneys had been relaxing and drinking whiskey that evening, and a farmhand who had spent a few hours with them hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. And then furthermore, no source of ignition could be found for the blaze. And although the flames had been intense enough to reduce Miss Rooney to a pile of ashes and a few fragments of bone, they had not spread to the rest of the room. The fire seemed to have started in her body and stayed confined to her body. And her husband simply died from like smoke inhalation. So there's a case where there's like how earlier we said like two of the criteria were there. Alcohol was involved. They were drinking whiskey. The victim was an elderly female and
didn't burn the shit around them.
Did not burn the shit around them. Her feet fell off because that was the only thing. Only thing left.
Yeah. I'm just imagining a pair of like Air Force Ones. Like just sit there with some burnt ashes around them.
Oh my god! But
or like some Jordans.
The house was
like
still
a SpongeBob
intact,
zoom in,
right? You know, so there wasn't anything else like burned. There was no apparent source of ignition, though she was in her kitchen, so I guess would have been a stove there. Apparently, that wasn't the source of the flames. There was just a pile of ashes there. So like she is like from those characteristics from from medical jurisprudence that. Like she is like a poster case of spontaneous human combustion.
Yeah.
Of people just.
The hoe looked like a burnt garbanzo bean.
Oh my god. But I think that's like really interesting how do you feel about that Christmas morning when you go to grandma's house and she's a pile of ashes on the floor and grandpa's all suffocated and smothered in the chair over next in the living room.
Yeah, be like, I don't know what y'all did, but y'all got smited.
That is like one of the things that people have said that the reason spontaneous human combustion happens is people who were living a debaucherous lifestyle, and vibing in too much alcohol, and this was God's punishment.
Well, if that was the case, like there'd be a lot of like Irish, Catholic priests who just went kablooey.
Speaking of Irish people, there is a famous case that happened in 2011.
Oh, do tell.
So, and it's actually the first case that's actually been officially classified as a death caused by spontaneous human combustion.
Ooh.
So the victim's name was Michael Faraday. He was 76 and he died in his home in Galway. And so he died in late 2010, but his case was ruled in 2011. He died in like December. The West Galway coroner, Dr. Sirhan McLaughlin, said it was the first time in his 25 years of investigating deaths that he actually recorded a death to spontaneous human combustion.
Well, yeah, I imagine that's something that you don't just like. It's Tuesday. Just another old bastard went up like a freaking torch.
So, oh my God. You would think if it was God's wrath for alcoholism, there'd be a lot more people just lighting up.
Yeah, we wouldn't even need streetlights at this point. Shit. Ireland would look like California does on a regular basis.
Oh my God. So the experts that were investigating Mr. Flaherty's case, they said that there was a fire in the fireplace of the sitting room where the badly burnt body was found, but they determined that the cause of the blaze that killed Mr. Flaherty was not the fire in the fireplace. There was so he happened to drop and burn in the living room or the sitting room.
I'm just imagining like a Sims character sitting on a rug next to a fireplace.
They also said there was no trace of any accelerant, and there was no evidence to suggest foul play.
Was he a boozer?
That's a good question. I'm not too sure.
He's Irish. We're just gonna say yeah. Move on with it.
They said they found that he had been lying on his back with his head closest to the open fireplace, but the fire had been contained to the sitting room. The only damage was to the body, which was totally burnt, and the ceiling and the above him and the floor beneath him were a little burnt, and obviously had like the sooty ashes on it.
Okay, hear me out. An ember popped from his fireplace that was lit right, and it landed on his stomach that was extended like a big old balloon, and it just just from one ember, just all that alcohol in his stomach just went kaboof.
Oh, ugh. He was like popped.
Well, I was thinking more of like cartoonish than gory, but I was thinking more like like a Looney Tunes style, like distended belly, and then just like a kablooey.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, not more of a homie's got an IED shoved up his ass. Like, oh, it was the dang IRA.
Oh my gosh.
They put C4 up his bunghole.
Boom. The only thing left is his hands and feet.
Yep, there you go.
But the crazy thing is, the weird thing about spontaneous human combustion is to actually reduce a body to ash, like a cremation, the fire has to be about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit in order just to reduce somebody to ashes. So like, if a fire is burning that hot, why doesn't the whole house burn down?
Yeah.
So that's just something so strange, and it's really interesting.
Turns out we're only missing one thing from like these coroner reports. Yeah, they all lived in like these stone shacks. They slept on slabs. Like that's why their bed's still there.
So here we go to another case. This took place in 1952. Or sorry, this took place in the morning of July 2nd, 1951. And it happened to a Miss Mary Reeser, who was born in Columbia, Pennsylvania. So that morning, Mary's landlady went to deliver a telegram to an apartment where she lived at that time in St. Petersburg, Florida. Touching the door handle, she found it strangely warm to the touch. So it's like almost Home Alone style, where she's like burning her hand on the doorknob.
Yeah.
She called the police, who broke into the apartment to find the scene described in this photograph. And I will put the photograph up on the screen here.
True. There ain't nothing left but the bitch's foot in the toilet.
The only thing really left was
looks like her walker.
Mary's left leg with her shoe still on. Her backbone and her skull
That's pretty horrendous.
were just there in a pile of ashes. So something pretty notable about this case is it was the first case in spontaneous human combustion where more modern police and forensic techniques were applied. But of course, being in like the 1950s, they weren't nearly as good, as advanced with forensics as we are now. So they still remained pretty baffled. A year after that incident, Detective Cass Burgress of the St. Petersburg Police said, "Our investigation has turned up nothing that could be singled out as proving beyond a doubt what actually happened. The case is still open. We are still as far as establishing any logical cause for the death as we were when we first entered Reeser's apartment." And then the police chief added to the statement that as far as logical explanations go, this is one of those things that just couldn't have happened, but it did. The case is not closed and may never be to the satisfaction of all concerned. So that's like, yeah, it's just like wild.
Yeah.
And so I guess she was like walking to the bathroom because you can see like the toilet in the background. And I don't know. Maybe she felt sick or something and then just went up in flames.
I have a theory.
What's the theory?
So you see, on top of Granny's ashes and severed leg, there's a walker. So I'm assuming she can't walk that good. So she probably dragging her feet. She built up too much static, had gas, boom. Granny went up like a freaking like a Christmas tree.
God. Well, well, she looks like she's wearing like a normal like a shoe that you would wear outside, but not like a slipper.
Yeah,
but
like
honestly, like that's not a bad like theory, honestly, because we'll get into what more people think about what potentially could be happening here. And so let's hold on to that thought because it's kind of funny,
okay, yeah. See,
but we'll see.
Single-handedly myself, I just Sherlock Holmes this bitch's death. Pick up your legs, Grandma. You're gonna blow up. There's one little static, and just poof. It's just looks like that scene from Hannibal with the wheelchair going down the road covering gasoline.
Oh my God. So this case in April of 1985, it's not nearly as extreme, but in Birmingham, there was a death of Mary Carter, who was 86 years old. She was found dead in her flat. The cause of death was ruled as a heart attack, yet she had burns on her body that could not be explained. So maybe she started to combust and had a heart attack and died and just didn't burn completely. Or maybe she started to light on fire, which gave her the heart attack, and she died.
When one combust out of nowhere, most people would probably be a little startled.
Probably a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, Grandma turned into a Rage Against the Machine album cover.
Oh my gosh. So another interesting case here is Dr. John Erling Bentley. So he was a 92-year-old physician who lived in a small 2-story home in Coudersport, Pennsylvania. So in December of 1966, his charred remains were found by a meter reader in his otherwise undamaged house. So that morning, meterman Don Gosnell entered the house of Bentley as a part of his morning rounds. He made his way to the basement at around 9 a.m. when he noticed a hole in the ceiling above him. Small embers still burned from the floor upstairs. Gosnell attempted to locate Bentley when he stumbled upon his charred remains in the bathroom on the second floor. Gosnell described a bluish smoke and a sickly sweet odor around the scene. All that remained of Bentley, which was identifiable, was his browned lower leg and shoe. The rest of Bentley had burned completely to ash, some of which had fallen through the hole to the floor below. Bentley's robe, partially burned, sat in the bathtub, where Bentley's walker was also leaning. Bentley had been a family physician from 1925 to 1953, and after a hip injury in 1947, he needed the walker to get around. And the walker was noticeably not burned.
Very weird.
Yeah. So Gosnell summoned the fire department, and then the deputy coroner, John Deck, and mortician Dick Lindholm, who could find no sure cause of fire nor a definitive answer as to why only Bentley and the hole in the floor burned. Deck speculated that Bentley, who was a frequent pipe smoker, ignited himself after falling asleep while smoking.
But in the bathroom?
So I guess, like, evidence was present in his bedroom as well as the hall leading up to the bathroom, but they weren't able to really recreate what happened. So it's possible that maybe he dropped some of the ashes from his pipe, like when he fell asleep, like he was smoking in bed and he lit on fire. Maybe he was trying to run as fast as he could to the bathroom, as close as water source to douse the flames. And he just went up.
Plop.
Yeah.
Rip bozo.
It's, oh my God. It says Dr. Bentley was also known to keep matches in his pockets. I guess, to light his pipe with. It's possible maybe that they erupted into flame, and maybe
it's all that shuffling around. Homie didn't pick up his feet.
And maybe that was enough to like light a small fire and cause his body fat to burn. But yeah, I think that's interesting. So it's another case where the victim's elderly. They still had a leg left, so that fell off.
Yeah.
The fire only really caused damage to the floor and then the ceiling of the basement. So not a whole lot. And obviously his walker somehow was in the room with him and was still untouched. So that's pretty weird.
Yeah. And just a The stump laying there.
Yep. So let's get into some theories of what the actual cause of spontaneous human combustion is. So the main theory that has the most scientific consensus behind it is called the wick theory or the wick effect.
So they go burning up like a wick on an oil lamp.
Or like a candle. So the wick effect is the partial or total destruction of a human body by fire, and it's when the clothing of the victim soaks up melted body fat and acts like the wick of a candle. So the person just burns, and that's typically why only like hands and feet are left, because it acts like the human body acts like an inside out candle.
Oh, pleasant. Someone should have road flap his asshole and he went up.
Oh my god. So that's the main theory right now. And so there was actually an article, it's not more of a scientific article in the Journal of Burn Care that was posted out and published in 2012, where the authors looked at over 12 patients, could be termed like spontaneous human combustion patients. And they looked and they said that there has to be a unique series of events that have to take place for the human body to incinerate. So the flame burn victim has to die for the body fat to start melting. So they're just like recently dead. There has to be a tear in the skin that has to occur so that the melted fat to impregnate the charred clothes to act as the wick effect.
So they gotta be like half a goo pile first.
So they have to not necessarily be a goo pile, but they have to die, have a tear in their skin. Leaking. There has to be an ignition source that can produce. The person has to die. There has to be a tear in the skin for melted fat to impregnate the clothes. And there has to be an ignition source that actually can provide the heat to start the body fat to start melting and to make them actually like light up. So, but the authors here says that it's not really spontaneous combustion because people don't.
External ignition source.
They don't just light up. There has to be an external ignition source. The person has to die. So maybe when they die, they fall and they fall, they get like a skin tear that exposes their body fat. The flames allow the fat to melt and start to burn. And then that's actually how they burn. So they say that like they don't think spontaneous human combustion is actually a good term for it. They suggest the term fat wick burns just to describe the phenomena, which if that's how it happens, then yeah, that could be more applicable. But there have been a couple stories of people just randomly bursting into flame. And there's been a couple stories of people actually seeing it.
Yeah. Plus, if you also need to take into account that everything around them didn't burn. And also if you've seen any cases where morbidly obese people had to be cremated and then their fat liquefied and sloughed out of the crematorium and then burn the whole funeral home down, because that's actually happened multiple times.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fuel, right? So I mean, it's kind of a morbid way to think about it, but like, if you get enough liquid fuel that's on fire, and if it starts leaking out of where it's supposed to be,
yeah, just some Buffalo Bill oil lamp oil, just poof.
Oh my!
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it is told.
There was also an experiment done to try to prove the wick effect, not in a Buffalo Bill fashion, but with dead pigs.
Oh, okay. So it's just like it's a typical kitchen grease fire.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is they took Miss Piggy, put her in a flannel, and then poked a hole in her side, left her laying there dead, and then like lit the bitch up.
Something like that.
Wonder if this will show up for you so you can hear it, but I bet they sound like something like this.
The one theory, an experiment done by a biologist by the name of Brian J. Ford, he was looking into spontaneous human combustion and he was using pigs as proxies. So they took a couple of dead pigs and they marinated the abdominal tissue in ethanol for a week. And then, so what he said is even when cloaked in gauze moistened with alcohol would not burn. Alcohol is not normally present in our tissues, but there is one flammable constituent of the body that can greatly increase in concentration, and it's triacylglycerol lipids cleave to form fatty acid chains and glycerol. So the idea is that humans build up too much acetone in their bodies, which can ignite. So these pigs had their abdominal, like the pieces of abdominal tissue were soaked in kind of acetone, and then they were ignited. The two dummies that they used to like as their human proxies, once they lit, they burned in about 30 minutes, and only the legs were left after the burn. He kind of showed that when they got too much acetone, they can ignite and burn in a similar fashion to what these spontaneous human combustion cases are, which would reflect potentially back with like the alcohol. If they're drinking too much alcohol and they die, that can cause them to burn. So I don't know about if all the patients of or victims of spontaneous human combustion were like alcoholics and were just drinking all the time like a fish. And then
so they're basically pickled with alcohol.
And then something happens that they light on fire and they burn. So that would kind of combine with the wick effect. So something with people's alcohol or acetone levels could potentially be explaining why people are lighting on fire in a more conventional method. But there's some alternative theories on like why people are going up in flames.
Freaking Fantastic Four, flame on.
So one theory is that there's too much methane buildup in digestive tract. So potentially, maybe they're eating too much food and getting a little gassy. That just maybe they get a little too hot, and then all of a sudden, woof, they go up in flames potentially from having too much methane. Which I don't know. I feel like that wouldn't result in them burning. I feel like that'd be more of just like an explosion, like they just pop, and then there'd be like guts everywhere.
Yeah, because why is this only happening in people? Like you say, like it could be like the alcohol thing, but I mean, you see what happens like when cows. You see what happens when like cows get their like what is it? It's digestive issues where they build methane in their stomachs.
Yeah,
can't remember what it's called, but I feel like you would be able to like to see this more in like situations like that with animals instead of just they got methane in their system and then they went up like a candle.
Yeah.
You ever heard any farmers talking about their cattle going up like a wick?
Just going woof. I'm not too sure. See, another theory that's like an alternative from the wick effect is actually ball lightning causing people to combust. So ball lightning is just like literally like a glowing spear of lightning. It's usually present when thunderstorms are nearby. It's fairly rare, but there is a large number of sightings of it. And ball lightning is really weird. It's like a ball of light, usually bluish in color.
The ball lightning is really weird. It's like a ball of lightning.
Yes. But I was gonna say is it can float through objects sometimes, and sometimes those objects are people. And when that happens,
and then grandma gets blown apart, except nothing but her ankle and shoe.
Yes.
Yeah, because the bitch got Kamehameha. And then she a ghost now.
But I was gonna say sometimes the weird part of ball lightning is there's been stories where it seemed like the ball lightning almost had a sense of agency to it, like it was following people or making choices, and that's what the weird part was, not just that it's a glowing ball of lightning.
Homie got hit with the blue turtle shell.
So one case of this this happened back on May 25th of 1989. It was a place by the roadside near Kereksend village. It was 109 kilometers from Budapest. So the victim was a 27-year-old engineer within whose body it's conjectured ball lightning formed. So the man stopped his car and walked to the edge of a field about 10 meters away to pee. Suddenly, his wife, who had remained behind in the car, saw that the young man was surrounded by a blue light. He opened his arms wide and fell to the ground. His wife ran to him, noticing that one of his tennis shoes had been torn off. You know, if their shoes get knocked off, it's bad.
Yeah.
Although it looked hopeless, she tried to help him, but soon after, she was able to stop a passing bus. Amazingly, the bus was filled with medical doctors returning from a meeting. Unhappily, they immediately pronounced that the man was dead. So they did an autopsy afterwards.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but your husband got hit with a Hadouken.
So they found a hole in the man's heel where his shoe had been. His lungs were torn and damaged, and his stomach and belly were carbonized. So that was indicative of internal combustion. Just as the blue light is proof of atmospheric electricity, well, a damaged heel and shoe are indicative of electrical earthing. So this man got out of his car in a field to take a piss, and he got really unlikely, and everything aligned perfectly, and he just went, and that was it.
Yeah, homie hit the reset button.
Right, a little too hard there. He got sent to the shadow realm.
Yeah, homie he stepped on God's landmine, and he got cooked.
So another alternative theory, it's actually the Kundalini energy going awry, and that is causing people to go up in flame.
And do you mind explaining what Kundalini is?
Yes. So
hippy dippy bullshit.
Kind of hippy dippy bullshit, kind of maybe not. I don't know. But so Kundalini is a form of divine feminine energy, or Shakti in Hinduism, and it's believed to be located at the base of the spine in what's called the Muladhara chakra. So there's several chakras in the body, which are kind of like energy points that go from the base of like the spine and groin up to the top of your head. And sometimes Kundalini energy, when it gets too hot, it might literally cause people to go up in flames. So there was a famous guru in the name of Gopi Krishna that had several close calls while doing meditation with this, that they felt like they literally he was starting to burn up because of the energy. So the theory is that if, you're not prepared, so little old grandma in the kitchen on Christmas Eve, all of a sudden her chakras aligned just the right way for the Kundalini energy to go up, and she went up in flames.
So to bring it back to more Street Fighter references, she got hit with that yoga fire.
Yes. So somebody, Penny Kelly, has described Kundalini as an increase in electrical current in the body. And he says that they speculate that the voltage potential of the body dramatically increases during Kundalini energy and spontaneous human combustion. So older individuals who are less physically fit may be unable to endure such high voltage potentials in current flow, and that may be the causative factor in spontaneous human combustion. So it's like their body, they just can't handle the energy, and they go up in flames.
Homie just couldn't hang.
They couldn't hang.
Yeah. And then he went blue.
Yep. There is another alternative theory. It's called the subatomic pyrotron theory. And the theory states that there's an extremely small but high-powered particle like a neutrino that zips between spaces between the quarks that make up atoms. So this is like quantum physics shit.
There's that Jimmy Neutron brain blast looking animation.
It says on a rare occasion, this rogue particle may score a direct hit with a quark and sets off an internal chain reaction. And this person calls it the internal Hiroshima effect, which may cause some spontaneous human combustion.
Just, Jimmy, I don't feel too good. Just cuts to flashlight beams coming out of mouth and eyes.
Yeah, it was
nuclear explosion from the inside out.
Yeah,
but somehow it doesn't affect anything around them, except for some scorch marks and some goop.
Yes, another theory that people run is called the current. He dubbed it. I believe this was Larry Arnold. He dubbed it the cartography of combustion. So he said there's been a lot of abnormal fire phenomena relating to people and property in the UK, and he's noticed that a lot of these are on ley lines. So what ley lines are is they're all over the world, and they're supposedly these routes where energy flows throughout the world, like geomagnetic energy, just magical energy, that kind of thing, like earth energy or whatever, however you want to say it. What happened is maybe sometimes under the correct circumstances, this high level of energy can cause people to go up in flames. So like they're susceptible to it. So I don't know. Maybe little old grandma again. She's on a ley line. She didn't know about it, and
And she basically just stepped into a giant microwave.
yes, and woof, lit up. So I think that's interesting. But yeah, I don't know. Of all the alternative theories, I feel like ley lines probably aren't it.
Yeah, I don't think you really have to worry about somebody stepping on a invisible line and just getting cooked.
They go to Stonehenge and just go like go up in flames.
Yeah, just lay out.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's been a lot of historical cases. There's been so much that we didn't get to touch on, but I don't know. It's a interesting phenomena for sure. I just don't know what the exact cause is. I mean, I guess, and it really hasn't been proven yet either exactly what the cause is. Like, is this the wick effect?
Maybe ball of lightning
or ball lightning? Like, obviously, like a bunch of electricity going through somebody will make things go woof. Have you ever seen those videos of those Russians climbing up those big high amperage power lines and they just go
Yeah, I was gonna say the monkeys in India videos. Just touch a transformer and just
Yep. There's so many just weirdness of like, you know, the knight in the 1400s drinking too much wine. It's going up in flames. The countess
turned himself into a damn steam cooker.
Yeah. Like the countess going up in flames and just having her feet left. Little old grandma in the 1880s is going up in flames and smothering, choking out her husband with her corpse fumes. I don't know. It's so weird. I want to lean towards it's probably more of the wick effect of all the alternative theories. I don't think it's methane building up in the gut because I don't think that would cause someone to just burn. I think that would be more of an explosion.
Yeah, that'd be more like when you see like the whale carcasses wash up on the beach and they just go like a pop.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like a roadkill deer on the side of a road and like, you know, they get real hot in like middle of summer and just pop.
Yeah. Of the alternative theories that we discussed, I think it's either ball lightning or maybe the Kundalini energy going haywire. Maybe people do have like some kind of like metaphysical energy you can tap into, but if people aren't prepared for it, like they don't train with it, and it just goes off and they're not prepared, then yeah, I can see how they just go woof up in flames.
I'm leaning more if it's anything, it's maybe ball lightning, maybe,
yeah. I mean,
shit's whack.
It is like it's crazy. Could you imagine, like, you know, you're just chilling in your bed and ball lightning comes through the window and game over, man. But what do you think? Do you lean more towards like it's the wick effect, like a certain chain of events happens and these people light up because they're like they had too much alcohol or acetone in their system, and or do you think it's more of like a spooky phenomenon where sometimes people just go up in flames?
I'm thinking maybe it has to just be like a right set of circumstances for it all like to happen. Like I have no idea how or any of the or why none of the other shit burns around them, but yeah, they are a burnt piece of gristle now.
Burnt piece of gristle. Yeah, but I don't know. It's I think it's really interesting and fun to look into anyway. Like there's been like a couple hundred cases over the last several hundred years, so this doesn't happen a ton of times, but you know,
every once in a while somebody just gets cooked out of nowhere.
Yeah. And I guess the skeptical argument would be like, if there's so many people in the world now, why isn't this happening more frequently? But I mean, if the chain of events that have to happen, like they have to happen a certain way, then like maybe that's why it is so rare, because, you know, if it's like 12 steps that have to occur or less, you know, maybe it's only 5, but they have to happen in a particular order for people to just go woof.
Yeah, or somebody gets mini Hiroshima'd.
Or mini Hiroshima from the inside out.
Yeah. Which again, I feel like you more like pop if that happened, but
yeah, but the weirdest thing is though is like the body, they have to burn so hot to be reduced to ash, and I don't understand how these houses just don't burn down from the heat. Like only like the chairs or like a part of the floor that they're laying on is burning.
Yeah, I mean, unless they were like an immediate just like flash cooked, and then like, somehow all the fire went away.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I guess if it was hot enough, these are all in enclosed spaces.
Yeah,
Unless it got so hot enough so fast, it sucked all the oxygen out.
maybe. But you would think it would
And
cause other parts of their house to ignite, because like if we go back to the case of the Countess, like she had like bed sheets and curtains and all that, and it was like none of that was really lit up. They were a little charred and
yeah,
covered in soot, but not like burned out. It's just
yeah, you assume
strange.
she'd be like cooked.
And who knows how long it takes. Like with the pig experiment, the dummies took about 30 minutes to be reduced to ash, except for the legs. So like that's not a long time, but it's more than enough, you would think, for a house fire to occur.
Yeah, you'd assume like everything around them be burnt.
You would think so. Anyway, I think it's really interesting and kind of spooky woo. People just going,
Very spooky woo.
just kind of like minding your own business. Maybe getting a little too crunk there, and then
Just,
game over.
yeah, just cooked.
Yeah. Anyway, if you guys have enjoyed listening to this episode of Enter the Rift podcast, please let us know what you think. Share it with your friends. Have a good night, and don't go up in flames.
Peace.